Hello everyone, Rurikhan here coming at you with another video. Welcome back to Final Fantasy XIV, and before we get started with today's topic, I would like to thank everyone for the overwhelming amount of feedback that I received in my recent healers video. Now I went ahead and I made a pinned comment in that video where I talk about a lot of the points that were brought up in the discussion in the comment section for that video. Usually I reply to individual comments, but there were so many comments and so many of them kind of like bringing the same talking points that I figured I would just address everything in one pinned comment. And yeah, I realized that a lot of people would look at that comment section and be discouraged by it. I choose to look at it as an extremely passionate fan base, and I actually think that that's a good thing. So hopefully some of you will enjoy my next videos more, and if not, that's okay too. Thank you very much for giving the channel a shot anyway. But anyway, let's get started with today's topic. And this actually comes from the comment section as well. This was a comment by Nova Vortex, and he said, "What motivated you to get into Final Fantasy XIV specifically?" And to answer that question, I figured I would take you guys with me back through memory lane all the way to 2013, because that's when things kind of got started with me for Final Fantasy XIV. Now, at the time, I was aware of the fact that Final Fantasy XIV had launched and it had flopped because it had some serious issues. A lot of players did not like the game. A lot of critics also slammed the game because they said the game had serious problems. And you guys know the story of 1.0, at least I would assume you do. If you do not, then you should look at the Final Fantasy XIV no-clip documentary, because it is incredibly informative and it tells you that whole timeline of what happened with Final Fantasy XIV, which is a really cool story. But yeah, I was aware of that particular situation, and it was the first year that I went to E3, which is kind of like a story in and of itself. And if you guys are curious, that is in the main channel. There's like a video which is the story of my first trip to E3, which also had its share of problems. But yeah, so I went to E3, and one of the things that I wanted to do was to get an interview with someone from Square Enix to see if I could, talk about the relaunch of Final Fantasy XIV and what went wrong with the game, and, what were the defining features of the game, to see if it was a game that I would be interested in, to see if it was a game that my community would be interested in. And I actually did that interview for... At the time, they were known as Game Station, but it was also the time that they were rebranding to Polaris. That interview is no longer up on their channel because they kind of they changed stuff around and whatnot. But initially, that interview went to the Game Station channel as well, which was pretty cool. I liked having content that I had done interviews for be present on a much bigger channel, because I was hanging out with the Game Station crew at the time. They had like a camera crew going through, and I helped them also do interviews for like Warframe and other games, but regardless. So we were able to talk to Matt Hilton from Square Enix, and he let us interview him about Final Fantasy XIV, which is pretty cool. I got to ask some questions and stuff that I was curious about, and one of the things that really grabbed my attention was when he said, well, and you know how in many games you have to basically you pick your class and you level up that class, and that's it. And if you want to level a new class, you have to start from scratch, because I'm sure we've all had situations that we start up a class in MMO, and you start playing it, and then halfway through you're like, I don't really like this class, I should try something else. Then you have to start from scratch, and it's a complete pain, right? And they said that that was something that they weren't doing in 14, and that if you wanted to, you would be able to level up all of the classes in the game. And that was like a very interesting proposition, because I'm like, well, I can swap around classes and stuff. That sounds pretty cool. Not just that, but there were other things that I liked. Like I liked what I was seeing, because they, at the time at E3, they were running the Ifrit trial. So you'd have like long ass queues of people all, going to PCs and stuff and playing the Ifrit trial. And, it made me curious, because I liked the animations of the characters. As you guys know, I'm really into animations. So I really liked the animations, the visual effects that were being shown on screen. I was like, wow, that looks pretty cool. So basically I got Matt Hilton's contact, and eventually when the beta came to PC, there was like a closed beta with an NDA and all that jazz. I basically started harassing him like, listen, if you're a developer or if you're a community manager or something and you give me your contact, let me tell you, if I'm interested in your game, I'm going to be spamming you until you give me access. That's just the way that it is, man. What do they say? The squeaky cog gets the oil, or whatever. I don't know what the expression is, but something like that. So, I started messaging him, hey man, can I get access to the closed beta? I really want to check it out and stuff. So I go and I play the closed beta, and I was like, oh, this is cool. I like the combo system they got going. I played Gladiator during the beta. I usually don't play too much during betas, though. I play about enough to get an idea of what the game is and see if I'm interested or not. I don't tend to like start grinding my way through betas because we all know that progress is going to go away. And, you know, it's just something that I would rather not burn out, right? So I play the PC beta, and I'm like, this is kind of cool. I like this. I want to check this out when it actually came out. Eventually a PS4 beta happened as well. I don't know the time difference. I think it was significantly, at least a couple of months, maybe a year. I don't know the exact dates here because this was a long ass time ago. And as everybody keeps telling me, I have a goldfish brain when it comes to remembering stuff. But so I played the PS4 beta as well, and I really liked it because when I played it on PC, I was essentially playing mouse and keyboard. So it's very familiar to me, the way that stuff works with mouse and keyboard MMOs, because I used to play a lot of WoW back in the day. And when I played on PS4, seeing how stuff worked with a controller, I was like, huh, I really like this. I like the idea of playing an MMO with a controller. This is really cool. Before that, I think had I played it? I don't know. I don't know exactly when Guild Wars 2 came out, but I remember at some point I also got like this app that allowed you to use a controller in Guild Wars 2, and I also like that. But anyway, I really liked playing Final Fantasy XIV with a controller. Like, that felt better to me for some reason. And also the fact that it would be on the PS4, and I have friends that have PS4, and it was going to have crossplay with PC and also PS3. It was going to have all of these crossplays. And I was like, man, this is hella cool. Like, I'd like to get into this. So when the game eventually came out on PlayStation 4, I started playing it. I played a significant chunk of it. I played Marauder and Gladiator in order to unlock the Warrior class. And then I also went and I unlocked the Paladin class. And this is really cool because, like, the first class that I unlocked, because back in the day you had a 2-class system. For those of you who don't know, those who start playing now, this is not the way the game works now, but back in the day, in order to get a warrior, you'd have to level up Marauder to a certain level, then you'd have to level up Paladin to a certain level, and then you would do your job quest and it would transform you into a warrior, or you would do the one that transforms you into a Paladin, again, if you want to do tanks, because those were they the only 2 tanks? Yeah, they were the only 2 tanks on release. It was the Warrior and the Paladin. So I unlocked both classes, but I did start with the Warrior. And then eventually I got burned out. And the reason I got burned out on the game is because I was playing it wrong. And what I mean by that is that, you know how you play World of Warcraft? I don't know how many of you guys played World of Warcraft, but basically the way that you do it is you go into a quest hub and you just like pick up all of the quests in there, and then you run outside and you look for the markers, and then you just like do all of the quests, and then you go back to the quest hub and you turn everything in. And a lot of the times you don't even read those quests, let's be honest. I would say like 80% of the player base would not read the quests. That's the same way that I was playing Final Fantasy XIV. Just a big mistake. So it's not particularly surprising that I would burn out, because like you go to every hub and there's just like so many quests there that it's completely overwhelming. Speaking of which, if you are a new player, you should pay attention to the different types of quest icons. I'm going to try to put, if I can find them, and if I'm doing a good enough job editing this video, I'll put the quest icons to the side here, and I will label them for you. So basically there's one type of quest, which is your main story quest or your main scenario quest. And those are the most important quests for you to do. Those are the quests that you really want to focus on. And those are the quests that you want to read the quest text and pay attention during the cinematics and all of that jazz. You want to make sure that you pay attention to those quests. Then there's another quest, which is a different symbol. It's got like a plus sign on it. And those quests are quests that unlock things. Like some of those quests will unlock game systems. Other quests will unlock dungeons. So whenever you see those, you definitely want to complete those as well. Even though it's not as important to read them, I would still advise you to just not skip through them. But those are the 2 most important type of quests. It is the main story quests and the unlock quests. As you level up, there will also be job quests. Those kind of pop up below your main scenario quest thing that notifies you what your next quest is, and they're also counted as those plus quests that I talk about here. And then there's just the standard quests, and the standard quests I would actually advise you don't worry too much about those unless you're super interested in what is happening in that specific zone, because they do give you more background on the zone itself, but they're not nearly as interesting as the main scenario quests or the unlock quests, and they don't get you that much reward or even that much EXP to begin with, right? There are better ways of grinding your EXP, like doing fates and doing dungeons. Those are much better for your EXP. But basically, like I said, instead of just paying attention to this classification of quests, I was just picking up everything and basically trying to do everything, and that makes the game a lot less interesting, so it's not surprising that I burned out. So I burned out, and I think my warrior was at like level 40 or something. And then eventually Heaven's Word released. And I was like, man, I want to get back into the game because I really liked some things about it. And what I tried doing then is picking up my level 40 character and start reading the quests then. Naturally, that didn't work because I didn't remember a damn thing that had happened before. And I played the game for a significant amount of time still, but it didn't grip me because, you know, the story was like just a big mess to me. And I was also at the same time still picking up all of those quests and trying to read those as well. And eventually I burned out on that as well. I never even got the Heaven's Word. So like I played Realm Reborn stuff during the Heaven's Word release and never even got the Heaven's Word. And then eventually in 2009, I've had people when I was live streaming other games that were like, Rurikhan, when are you gonna give Final Fantasy XIV a chance? And I think I actually played Battle for Azeroth. Yeah, I played Battle for Azeroth before I got really into 14. So I played Battle for Azeroth, and Battle for Azeroth was potentially the thing that made me hate World of Warcraft. Like I just legitimately got so pissed off at the way that they did loot in Battle for Azeroth that I was like completely driven away from it. Like it was every week I would do Mythic Plus because dungeons is kind of the content that I like. 5-player content in World of Warcraft has always been something that I like to do even more than raids. Like I like raiding, I think it's fun, but I like doing 5-man dungeons a lot more, and I would like to go and get my loot from 5-man dungeons. And yeah, right. Let's not even bring up the fact that they nerfed the loot in Mythic Dungeons even more for the upcoming expansion of World of Warcraft, which was, yeah, basically that made me never want to play World of Warcraft again. The way in which loot was handled, which I think was utterly ridiculous, and even the new systems that they're doing, it's just bad in my opinion. And anyway, I don't want to get too sidetracked in talking about WoW, but let's just say that how much I hated World of Warcraft was also something that kind of pushed me into wanting to give Final Fantasy XIV another shot. And so what I ended up doing was I said, okay, so here's what we're going to do. Because again, I also had people in my community pushing me, Rurikhan, you should try 14, try 14. Every time that I was not having fun in WoW, they'd be like, Rurikhan, what about 14, man? You should think about 14. Especially Cosbaz. I've told you guys about Cosbaz. He would always like harass me. Come on, man, you should try 14. Try 14, right? And I was like, okay, fine. I'm gonna go ahead, reactivate my 14 account, and I'm gonna start one new character from scratch, specifically for the purpose of playing through the whole story and actually paying attention this time. And, you know, I live streamed the whole thing, and I had the community kind of like give me a hand with certain systems, like explaining the stuff that I just told you guys about the quests, which I had no idea how it worked, and explaining like the different icons, the quests that I should pay attention to, the quests that I should ignore, and all that jazz, kind of like preventing me from diving into some of the rabbit holes that can take up a lot of time and not really give you a lot of reward, which was a really, really good thing that I was able to experience it like that. Because I don't usually like to look at guides and stuff when I'm just starting a game. I like to figure stuff out. I like to figure the strats of bosses and not on the go. So I like to go into things blind. I think that that is more fun than just, you know, seeing that someone else has already done it and kind of go back and watch what they've done and just basically memorize the strats. I find more fun to experience it as if it was the first time. So I went through the whole game, through all of the expansions, and I ended up loving the story, as is obvious. I even liked Realm Reborn. Like a lot of people say that they don't like Realm Reborn. I even liked Realm Reborn. So I go through the whole game, and one of the things that I notice is that Final Fantasy XIV has a lot more respect for its player base than something like World of Warcraft. And That was one of the things that marked me the most. As someone who felt incredibly disrespected by the way that they were handling World of Warcraft, to come to this other game and see that they were much more respectful, but not just respectful of the player base, but also more respectful of their own content, which is very important. It's a very key thing to 14 that I usually don't see a lot of people talk about. What do I mean by being respectful of their content? Well, in World of Warcraft, whenever, and other MMOs, it's not just the World of Warcraft thing. Whenever there's like a new expansion, it's almost like, let's put all the other content in the garbage and let's just focus on the new thing. The new thing is all that matters. Let's get players to the new thing as fast as possible and fuck everything else. That's kind of the attitude that I see from a lot of these MMO developers. They want to funnel their players into the new thing and like screw everything else. Whereas if you look at Final Fantasy XIV, there's so many systems that make going back and doing old content rewarding and satisfying and still somewhat challenging. Now, if you get to end game and you're like decked out in 480 gear or something like that, or 500 gear if you're Savage Raider and whatnot, or if you've just been farming your tokens appropriately, if you're decked out in 500 plus gear and you go and you do older content, then sure, it's not going to be as challenging as it was back in the day, but it does still, it's not going to be something that you just run in there, one-shot the boss, carry on with your life, right? It's still going to have certain mechanics that you might have to respect, depending on if you're doing it unsynced or not. I'm just assuming everything's synced. And it also has features if you have like a pre-made group that actually wants to experience the content at the actual difficulty that it was back in the day. There's a minimum item level option as well when you're queuing for a dungeon, which will actually nerf your gear to the point that it kind of simulates the experience that it used to be, or at least close to what it used to be back in the day, which again, I would not know because I started playing for real when Shadowbringers was out. So a lot of the content has changed since then. But just the fact that they respect that content enough to tell players, no, you should go back and you should do it again. And we're not going to make stuff like super easier for you to go back and just like run through it. If you really want to do certain things, you have to go and do it appropriately, like Palace of the Dead. And I know that Palace of the Dead is one of those things that maybe it's not super entertaining at this point to go back and do Palace of the Dead, but if you want to, it is there. And it works just like it used to. I actually have done Palace of the Dead not that long ago. I've also been doing Heaven on High. Heaven on High is actually very interesting to me because I like the tile set of Heaven on High more so than Palace of the Dead, so it's more appealing to me to do. I actually went up the floor, what was it? Me and two friends went up the floor like 50, I think. And that was really cool. I thought it was cool because you're experiencing like a different way to play the game, and you're experiencing different systems. I've actually gone back and started working on Eureka as well. It's just I then started leveling up a different job with a friend of mine who's also leveling up a different job. But I plan on still going back to Eureka and doing some of that content ahead of the Bajan front, which is, again, content that I think is interesting to at least check out. Maybe I'm not going to go super hardcore into Eureka and like completely lose God knows how many hundreds of hours to it, but it is fun to go back and experience some of that content. Besides that, there's also all of the dungeons. You can play all of the old dungeons at an appropriate level. Even if you don't do minimum item level, you still do it, and it's still not a one-shot fest. You're still not going in with a level 80 character and doing everything one-shot. And I think that is very respectful of the content that they have done. Because even though you can skip it by using the skip potions and all of that, you can still go back and you can experience it and see it for yourself. And, experience those dungeons the way that they were made. And again, that is some of the content that I really enjoy doing, is doing dungeons, running, in this case, 4-player content. I really like that. So not only it respects the players, it respects its own content, but then when you also add the fact that there's a really good story in there, and that story is not something that you need to get through like a third-party website or a third-party book. Because again, in a lot of MMOs, the story is actually told outside of the game as opposed to inside of it. All of the 14 story is told inside. Then outside, you can find additional lore and additional resources that maybe go deeper into certain topics that the game does not address. But it is still nice to be able to experience a story beginning to finish and not being like, why did this character do this? I don't understand. It's like, well, you need to go read the book. right? That kind of sucks when you have a story that does that. So there's that. There's, like I said at the start as well, the animations. There's the respect for the player base. There's the respect for their own content that does not just become like obsolete the second a new expansion launches. So there's just a lot of really good points that got me much more invested in 14 when I actually started paying attention to the story and playing the game correctly, or at least somewhat correctly. Because yeah, you could say that I still make a lot of mistakes, but you know, I'm still having fun, and I'm still heavily invested in it. And that's one of the reasons why I kind of started this channel, because I wanted to have a place to just create content for this game that I'm enjoying quite a bit. But anyways, that's kind of like why I got into Final Fantasy XIV specifically, and why this particular MMO appeals so much to me. But why does it appeal to you? Let me know in the comment section down below. Thank you all very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. If you did not enjoy this video, hit the dislike button, because feedback is important. I'll see you guys in the next one. If you enjoy the content, subscribe, bell notification icon, all of that usual jazz. Stay strong, stay safe, peace out.